Hello, everybody. Welcome to my talk. It's about 3 ways to build a web application faster and better. I hope you enjoy. My name is Fabian. I'm CTO of a startup called Rock Technology. And I'm CTO since almost 12 years now. So I was in the first code talks and the second code talks in 2019 code talks, speaking about my previous projects. So you see, I was CTO of Rocket Internet in the past. I was CTO of Project A Ventures, you may know. I co-founded a shop system called Spryker. And I have a history with code talks. I really enjoy to be here. I really like it. We didn't have code talks for 2 years, so great to be here. I hope you're all fit after a party night. And cool to see so many people here. Wonderful. So let's go and let's talk about web applications. Before we talk about how to build a web application, let's quickly have a look at what is a web application. This term web application is not as fancy as Web 3.0 or Ethereum, whatever, but it's probably what most of you will face in your everyday work. Web application is a dynamic website where users can interact. That's it. So in most cases, it's to earn money with a website, with a web application, sometimes not, whatever. A web application could be a shop system, but we're not talking about e-commerce today. We're talking about everything except e-commerce. Typical web application you may know from your day-to-day work is Personio. So that's a web application where you manage where companies manage their employees, where you can see users, tables, you can edit, you can put your vacations, your sickness, etc. This is, by the way, this type of web application is usually called SaaS, software as a service. There are other web applications. For example, this one here, you may know Get Your Guide. That's an online website where you can buy activities, tours, etc. So probably some of you have used it in the past. This is something, this is not a shop, but it's also not SaaS, it's somewhere in between. It's a web application. This one is the same. FinAuto, this is a website where you can get a car for half a year, so car flat rate. So it's a website, you have a catalog where you can see cars, you can book a car, you can arrange a time, you maybe have a mobile app. It's a web application. And this one here is also a web application. This is, I changed, this is my private O2. So I changed some data here. This is not my telephone number. This is also a web application. These guys do not call it SaaS. These guys call it customer portal. So customer portal is a very typical use case for web applications. So web application, you have a lot of typical building blocks or user stories. So these user stories are probably familiar to you. As a user, I can register, I can log in, I can notify, I can buy something, I can start a subscription, etc. That's web application. So this is what we're talking about today. And now the question is, how would we implement a web application? Let's do that together. Let's build a web application, theoretically, on a slide. I will not build it really like live coding. So first of all, let's imagine you're in a team and your mission is to build a web application. Something like Personio, something like, I don't know, whatever, some web application. You would probably start with a backend. So you go and select a backend technology stack. That could be PHP, and then maybe you use Laravel. So let's do a little poll here. Who of you would go with PHP? Yeah, many hands raised up. I'm a big PHP guy. So maybe some of you know Spryker. It's a very, very, very large PHP application. So good. You could also use Python and Django. Anyone would build a web application with Python? Some brave you. Cool. Anyone would use Ruby? Yeah. Okay, cool. And Node.js? Anyone would use Node.js for building web application? Yeah. So yeah, I personally switched from PHP to Node.js. because I like the idea of having the same language front and back end. Super good. Okay, then you would choose a database. There are two options available, either a relational database, SQL, or a non-relational database, NoSQL. Who of you would use a NoSQL database, like MongoDB, for building a web application? Some, okay. And who of you, and everybody else SQL, right? Probably. Okay. And and then you would probably choose a front-end stack. Front-end, you have many options. There are two categories. You can have a dynamic website. You would use React, Next, with Next, or you would use Vue.js, or Angular, or Svelte, or Flutter. This is option one. Option two is you do server-side rendering. So if you use PHP, maybe with Laravel, you would use Blade template engine. Everything is rendered on the server side. And this is also an option. So this is how you would usually start. You would create the stack, define your technologies, and I forgot something. You would also need to decide which type of API you would like to have, a REST or GraphQL API. So when you have this decided with your team, then you go and start building it. The blue one, this is my stack, by the way. So I just wanted to show you what my currently preference is. So I would go with React, Node.js, Postgres, and GraphQL. Okay, and now you start and build your application. So you go and build user story 1, user story 2, user story 3, and you're happy and it's all good. But in reality, there is something else that you need to do first, and that holds you back. I call it the commodities. So all these things here, you need to have in mind, you need to realize to build a proper web application. This is not your user stories. This is not what makes your application unique or great. This is just the default stuff, just the things you have to do because people expect it. And it's a lot of boxes here. That's why I colorize them. On the left side, you see the topics you need to face during development. You need a local development environment, so it runs on your colleagues' MacBooks, Windows, Linux, whatever. You need to think about how to design your API, build a responsive UI, server-side rendering, a dark mode, etc. Then you have common features that you probably need for any kind of web application. User login, registration, two-factor authentication, single sign-on, invite another user, files, upload, download, public files, private files, CDN, notifications, emails, subscriptions, payments. This is all the things that you need to realize to build a proper web application. And if you do that very well, then you have nothing, because this does not make you special. This is just the standard stuff. And of course, here the blue boxes, infrastructure. You need to operate it somewhere. You need to take care for security, for scalability, for performance. A lot of things to consider. And yeah, that increases your effort. When people think about building web application, they only think about their own user story. User story 1, 5 days, user story 2, 10 days, user story 3, 5 days, 20 days in total, super good. But in reality, these commodities will move up your total effort. In small web applications, the commodities can be a large chunk of your total effort. Of course, if you have a very large web application, then this is a smaller chunk, but you have to take care for them. So the question is, how can we make that better? So when I started my new startup, I started with the analysis. I checked how people build web applications, and it was interesting. Almost every developer that I asked starts from scratch. I'm coming from e-commerce, and if you start a new shop, you would use a shop system, obviously. Except about you building own shop system, but this is an exceptional case. But most companies would just use a shop system, maybe a Shopify, a Spryker, Hybris, Magento, whatever, and you would go. For web application, this way of thinking is not there. So people always start from scratch. They don't even look at the other options. That's why I would like to show you 3 options to build web applications better, faster. Let's start with our no-code solution. Then I show you the dev tools from the cloud providers. And then I explain you what a web application suite is. That term no-code is a hype term at the moment. It's very popular. And interestingly, there are no talks about no-code in this conference. That's why I would like to ask you, who of you ever tried or used a no-code tool to build a web application? Nobody? That's interesting. The reason is the no-code tools, they're very powerful, they're very interesting. I highly recommend to look at them. But their claim is you can build an application without developer, and most developers dislike that idea, that they are not needed. This is why also no vendor comes to developer conference and show a no-code tool, because... Okay, let's talk about no-code tools first. There are some very popular brands. You may know them, like Wix, Bubble, Mendix, APN, OutSystems, Retool. All these brands, you probably heard of them. Looks very shiny and nice, and they have big funding, these companies, very successful, but the idea is not new. So here, I found this screenshot. On the left side, you see a form builder from Visual Basic. So it's a DOS form builder. And the other one is Delphi 2, where you visually build a user interface for Windows, I think 3.1.1 applications. Not sure if every one of you tried that. Ah, you too, okay. Yeah, I never tried that. No, actually, no, not. Yes, I'm too young, you're right. So today it looks better. Today, this is Bubble.io. Bubble.io is a very popular, very big one. Yeah, you go there and you draw your application, so you put your buttons and tables and whatever. There's a template here, it's called EZ Task Manager, so you can load the template, you can adjust the template. You will have a task manager probably very, very quickly, much faster than you can write the code yourself. Here you can define the data model, so you can say these are the tables, these are the fields, this field is a string, this field is a number, whatever. And then here you define the logic. So you say, when this happens, when the user presses that button, then I send an email, then I do this, and this is how it works. So in this way, you can theoretically build any kind of web application without writing one line of code. Sounds promising. Of course, there's a reason why people are still willing to pay you and me, as developers, because this is not the final substitution for development. It has pros and cons. The big plus is you can get quick results. So when you start your project, you will have a steep progress curve. So in the first days, you can already have a user interface. Then it slows down a bit, because when your application becomes larger, it's harder to manage it in a user interface. It's easier for a developer, if you have modules or services, whatever, than doing all of this in a user interface. Imagine you have all these logical boxes there, and you try to build advanced logic. It would be too hard. And it's easy to learn, so you can train people in a week or 2 or 3 to understand it. And you don't need developers, quite cool. But at some point, when you're ambitious and you build a big application, you will reach the end. The idea of these no-code tools is that you can reuse existing components, but you cannot easily build whatever you like. That's not possible. This is not the idea. And at some point, you reach an upper boundary, limitations. And then you see the real problem, that all your implementation happens in the engine of the no-code platform. There is no button that you can press and get the code. So all your investment is in their engine. You're locked in. That means if you reach this limitation and you want to grow above that, you have to throw away everything and rebuild it. And this is what practically happens all the time. So People build this application, super nice, shiny, takes them 2 months instead of 4 months, nice. But after 1 year, they reach a limitation and then restart. That's why my opinion is these no-code tools, they are quite interesting for proof of concepts. Imagine you are fresh from university, you're not a developer, you want to build some prototype, maybe to get funding, then these tools are good. They give you a kickstart. They're also cool for internal tooling. You want to build some HR tool for your own company. You do not want, IT will not build it for you because it is always busy, and then use this tool to bypass IT. It's good. There's very small applications, it's super fine. But if you build ambitious SaaS projects, the ones that I showed you, like Personio and the others, you would not use such a tool. It's too much limitation. Same for enterprise customers. So if you build a big customer portal, like the one from O2 that I showed you, you would not use such a tool. So what else can we do? The next option is you would use a dev tool from a cloud provider. So cloud provider is our AWS, GCP, Azure, Alibaba, these guys. And this is how it typically look like. You have your own front end and free choice of tooling. Could be React, Vue, Angular, Flutter, React Native, whatever you like. Web app, mobile app. So here you own the code, you have a repository, you can deploy, you can build whatever you like, but you do not want to deal with the backend. Maybe this is not your home territory, maybe you don't need it. All you need is a database and an API and authentication. And this is what you get here in this scenario. So everything else comes from the provider. That could be a Firebase from GCP, AWS Amplify. There are also open source backend as a service available like Strapi, Supabase. So you put such a tool in place, define the data model, and the tool gives you an API, and you do not need to write any code here. One tool which is very powerful is AWS Amplify. It's less popular than Firebase, but it's very interesting. AWS Amplify has quite a big set of tools available. For example, it has a tool where you can import Figma, and it creates the React code. So it has a Figma to React converter. That's pretty awesome. And then you see this UI in their tooling, and then you can connect the text, the dummy text that you put in Figma with your data of your database. You wired up everything in the UI, and then you press a button, and they give you the source code for this. And it's already connected with their infrastructure. Then you can deploy this thing to a Lambda function, and everything works out of the box. It's pretty awesome. This is recommend to look at if if it fits to your use case again. So is this good or bad? It has the advantage that you own the code. At least the front end part of the application is yours. So you own your front end. It's good. And initially you're quite fast. So because you don't need to build a backend, that makes you fast, of course. And this makes it a really good tool for people who build a mobile app. So you build a mobile app, you just want to save data someplace, then a backend as a service or such a tooling is really cool. Or you build a lightweight web application, a dashboard or internal tooling, and this is, again, quite good. The problem with this approach is if you go with GCP or AWS, then you will be tightly coupled to the cloud provider. They give you this tooling for free because it locks you into their services. Then you stay with, if you use Amplify, you will stay with AWS forever because your code is mixed up with the infrastructure. So it's super nice that your REST API automatically spins up a Lambda function, super nice, but it's coupled. So if you someday decide to want to go away from AWS, maybe because of GDPR compliance problems, whatever, you have to rebuild this, refactor. It locks you in. You're also dependent on the roadmap of the provider. So let's imagine you go with Firebase, you would use Firestore. Firestore is like a MongoDB. And now you need a relational database. It's not available from Firebase. So you have to figure out how to do that. So you're locked into what they offer. That's why I think good use case for mobile apps, for pure web applications that do not have business logic. But if you build an ambitious project, again, like the one I showed you initially, this is probably not the right tool. But try yourself. It's for sure interesting. You will learn a lot. And the last alternative is, I call it Web Application Suite. It's a set of tools that help you to build a full-stack web application. With my company, Rock, this is what we're building. We're not the only one in the market. We're also looking for a nice term. So if something comes to your mind, how we could name this thing, Web Application Suite is one way. We could also call it Developer Toolset or whatever. We need to figure out how to name that. So what I show you now is some screens from our own company. But let's start with the question: what is a web application suite? So you probably never heard that term, or maybe you heard, but with a different meaning. Who knows? The idea here is, when you build a web application, you always have the same elements. So every web application looks more or less like this one. You have a main navigation, you have a search bar, you have a login, registration, you need to host it somewhere, you need the architecture behind the scenes. You always have the same challenges. I showed you initially this thing here, the commodities. And the idea of a web application suite is to give you an out-of-box solution that solves all the commodities. So all the commodities are working for you on the first day, so that you can focus your development time on what makes your application unique, on your own user stories. But you do not need to think about how to build a password forgotten feature, or file upload, or notification. This is a waste of your time. Technically, it has several parts. The suite, it starts with an open source Kickstarter application, which is a user interface like this one here. Nice looking user interface, has a navigation, has a content area, has a header, user account. Everything here is working. It's responsive, it has a dark mode, etc. This one is released under MIT license, so you can just copy it over. It's running for you right away. And then you would customize it, of course. So your own web application would not look like this. It would look differently. Maybe you would customize a bit. Maybe you would throw away some parts. Maybe you're not agreed with the technology decisions here. So we're using Material UI. You maybe want to use Tailwind. So you would need to flip that out. Totally fine. But the idea is to give you something that works out of the box. And not only the user interface, also the backend. You can see here, this Kickstarter application has this one is called Rock One from our company, Rock One. It has a front end, which is a React Next.js application with Material UI. But it also has a back end. There's a Node.js application with a framework called Nest.js, you may have heard of, and a Postgres database. And everything comes together in one monorepository with the MIT license. You just clone it, start the Docker file, it's running on your laptop in 5 minutes. So this is how you start. You start with an open source Kickstarter, part one. Part two is you need to host it somewhere. That's why the suite contains something we call serverless or very less hosting environment. So you just point to your repository, and the rest happens magically. You get it just running right away. QA1, QA2, QA3, staging environment, production environment, everything is working, and you don't need to care. If you want to host it yourself, if you want to deal with Kubernetes, Docker, Terraform, do it, no problem. The suite gives you something which is working out of the box, it's opinionated, it just solves the problem. And then you have these advanced features, a chat system, search engine, subscriptions, payments. And this here is shipped via API. So there is a headless, we call it feature as a service system that gives you a GraphQL API and a socket connection. In this way, you can access all these features. The Kickstarter is already integrated with all these features, so everything works out of the box. And it's up to you to use it, or to throw it away parts, or to replace parts. The idea is to give you something fully working, and then you can modify and cut out what you don't need. That is the main idea here. And you can try yourself. There's a demo. You can just open the demo and see it. Also, the code is on GitHub, so you can just look yourself at GitHub, find the code, and let's have a quick discussion at the end. When is this useful? The main advantage of this approach is that you own the code. Front end, back end, it's your database, your data model, everything is yours. So you have unlimited flexibility. You also get a state-of-the-art architecture right away. You don't need to discuss this and build a logging system. Everything is there. All concerns are covered. That means you will be pretty fast in your development time. The blue bar here, this is if you build your application from scratch. You're a bit slower initially because you have all the discussions, and then you're going up. And the red bar is if you use a web application suite. So you're pretty fast in the beginning because everything is just there. And then you stay fast because the architecture allows you to build it in a good way. If you build it yourself, under very high time pressure, you make compromises. If you use a suite, everything is in a good shape. There's also a con. You need developers. So if you build a web application and try to not have developers, then this is the wrong tool set. It's a tool set for developers. Okay, and if you enjoyed this talk and you want to get the slides today, you can just make a copy of that QR code and we will send it over. And that's it. Thank you very much.